Hi, this is Cheenu, and I welcome you to the HappYness Helix podcast. This is likely to be a series of episodes, starting off today with me talking to you and setting the stage for what the HappYness Helix is, right? And fortunately or unfortunately, you've got me today, and we hope to have guests coming in and sharing their experiences in terms of how they've lived a happy, inspiring, and inspired life. So today is going to be about setting the stage. Why do we call it the HappYness Helix? And taking a step back, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? I call myself a happiness coach. And the first question that people ask me when I tell them that I'm a happiness coach is, how do you coach somebody to be happy? So tell them that depends on what you think happiness is. To cut a long story short, it normally comes down to people telling me, isn't happiness a state of mind? I say yes, and you've made my life simpler by saying it's a state of mind. Because if you had said that it is something about what you eat or what you experience, then I would have had to start by explaining the difference between pleasure and happiness. So if happiness is a state of mind, we'll start from there. And would you also agree, therefore, that it depends on the choices that you make? And most people tend to agree that they say, yes, happiness is a state of mind. It depends on the choices that I make. So then I tell them, I, as a happiness coach, I support you in making appropriate choices that give you the greatest potential probability of the future you'd like to have. And if you get the future that you think you'd like to have, chances are that you'll consider yourself happy. And they say yes. And then I tell them, you know what, I'm going to complicate it a little more. And I say, as a happiness coach, I support you in making appropriate choices that give you the greatest potential probability of the future you think now that you'd like to have in the future. And they say, and they think about it a little. They roll their eyes and they say, yeah, that's about sounds right. So if it's about choices, then we need to look at what do we do when we make a choice? Are we actually making a choice voluntarily with awareness, with conscious awareness of the choice that we're making? Or is it a choice that we are making basis all the experiences that we have stored in our life, the unthinking choices? For example, if you were to place your hand on a hot surface, it's not like you're going to be thinking, oh my God, this is hot. I shouldn't be placing my hand here. I should remove it, otherwise my hand will get burnt. No, that's not what you do. What you do is you place your hand on that hot surface and you remove it without even being aware of it. And the hurting or the burning actually you experience after you remove your hand. So the brain is actually bypassed in that process. Certain processes that the autonomic nervous system that keeps us alive sometimes functions on its own. So the autonomic nervous system, it has absolutely one purpose: to keep us alive. Why does it want to keep us alive? Because unless I'm alive, I cannot live. And more importantly, for all mammals, this is something that's important. I cannot leave behind a copy of my genes. So to thrive, I have to survive first. To survive, I need to ensure that I don't get killed or I don't have pain. So neurologically, we have about, I'm going to be standing on the shoulders of giants when I talk about neuroscience and all of that. My interest is in practical application of the neuroscience that wonderful people, giants in the field, have already done a lot of work on. I do not profess any kind of expertise in that area of finding out. My reason for accessing neuroscience and everything else that I learn is very simple. How can I use this in real life? How can I use this in the life in my life and in the lives of people that I come into contact with. So the other question that I get asked is also, why did you choose to be a happiness coach? And I say that, you know what, I decided to be a happiness coach by default and drift, not by design. I was going through life happy and doing whatever it is that I was doing in my corporate career. And one day I decided, it sort of hit me. I wouldn't say I decided. It hit me that if something has a shape and a form, then it has a reason for it to exist. And this is something that people talk about as being purposeful, finding one's reasons for existence and all of that. I did use a lot of my time trying to find out what my purpose was. And then I realized that, you know what? It doesn't matter if I find my purpose and then put all my energy and effort into that. A simpler way of doing things would be to be purposeful in everything that I do. So right now, the only reason for my existence on this planet is this podcast episode that I'm recording. And if I do it with that diligence and with that commitment, chances are that the viewer, the listener, might actually find something of use in it. It's certainly not to show how much I know, because I know however much I know, it's going to be just beginning to scratch the surface of what is called knowledge. So I don't profess a great amount of knowledge. I do have access to a lot of knowledge, and I'm going to be hoping to share some of it during these podcasts with you. So come back to the podcast and why am I doing this podcast? My vision is of a planet in which all beings belong to and live in equally. Towards that vision, I have a mission. And that mission is to make the greatest possible positive difference in all. Because it's a little too vague, I actually came up with a more specific time-bound objective for myself. And that I call my goal. It's an intermediary goal. Any goal that any of us keeps is an intermediary goal. It's only a milestone because life is a journey. So I've given myself an intermediary step, which is the time that this body turns 60 years on this planet, and that happens on 15th of April 2026. So I came up with a specific, measurable, time-bound objective. You call it SMART, you call it whatever you want. I will make the greatest possible positive difference in the life of at least 1 million human beings by 15th of April 2026. So that's the reason I'm doing this podcast today. Right? And I'm going to be talking and relying on a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, a lot of insights that other people have shared. I'm a voracious reader. I consume information through multiple sources. I access a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books. I access videos. And the greatest teacher of them all, life. I just observe people. I look at what might be the reason that people behave in a certain way. So I'm going to be putting all of that as much as I can. When I know the source, I recollect the source. I will refer to the source and say, this is where I found it. There is a likelihood that I might not refer to the source, and some of you might be saying, this is what so-and-so said. Absolutely right. Which brings me to my next point, which is that there is nothing that is original. This statement that I've made, that nothing that is original, is itself not original. It might have been said 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times. I don't know how many number of times. The only truth is that everything that is said is a repeat. So I don't profess that anything is absolutely mine or my original. No, it isn't. Which also brings me to my favorite statement. People like it. I have copied this from my coach, a wonderful human being called Kichu Krishnan. And he said this beautifully. He said, there's no copyright, just copy it right. So I am asking you to do the same thing. If you find something that I share today or shared through me, that's the appropriate way of saying it. You find that useful, interesting, and you want to share it with people, please go ahead and share it. Absolutely no copyright for anything that is created through me. Just copy it right. Because if you're going to make some changes to what is being said here, it might change the complete meaning. So in that sense, make sure that you copy it right. Okay. Do me a favor, copy it right. Whenever you can, acknowledge where you got it from. Not because I want to, because I want you to feel good about it. I will always acknowledge the source where I got the information from. For example, one of the books that I read was the book called The Art of Being Kind. It's written by a Swedish doctor called Stefan Einhorn, written in Swedish, translated into English. There's one sentence, one paragraph that absolutely I love. And he says, very interestingly, the day we believe that we are our own ideal is the day we have to start again from scratch. So I don't believe that I'm the happiest person on the planet. Every single moment of my life, I'm learning how to be happy, how to be purposeful, how to be fulfilled, how to be free. And that's the purpose of this podcast. When we started doing this, talking about this podcast, a question that was asked, and one of the people asked me a question, is this a self-help book on happiness? And I said, no, it isn't. And they said, is this a self-help book on something else? I said, no, it isn't. And I didn't realize why I was saying, no, it isn't, no, it isn't. And then the words that were spoken by me, through me, made me open my eyes. I said, this is a self-help podcast on being responsible, on taking accountability, on taking responsibility for oneself, on being free. And that's what this podcast is all about. By now, some of you might be thinking, all right, when is the podcast going to start? It is starting. It has started. All of this is relevant. And we will be coming back to all of this. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the building blocks, some of the things that we are going to be referring to through the series of podcasts, right? And so I'm going to be talking to you right now about the HappYness Helix. What is the HappYness Helix? A helix is a spiral. The DNA strand is a double helix. So I'm talking about the HappYness Helix in the form of a spiral staircase of sorts. You can take your pick. It's a staircase or it's a spiral rope ladder, because climbing up is that hard. It's not easy. If it's a staircase, the steps are actually sloped upward. So not only are you climbing up, every step is going to be difficult. And when you come down, it's going to push you down. So every step is going to be difficult. And I'll say something, again, something that has been said through me a few times. And I'd like you to understand this for each and every one of you who's listening to this and saying, but that's not easy. That's difficult. It's very hard. Yes, it is. It's very simple, but simple doesn't mean that it's easy. Which is where I'd like you to remember this, and I'd like you to come back to this. It's difficult, extremely effortful, almost impossible before it becomes easy, effortless, and your own nature. I'll say it again. It's difficult, effortful, almost impossible until it becomes easy, effortless, and your own nature. Anything that we start is difficult. It requires effort. It requires conscious effort. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I'm going to ask you to be consciously aware. When you listen to whatever is being said here, I'd like you to adopt two approaches. One, the approach of a skeptic. How can you find this not applicable to you? Or how can you find that what I'm saying is not right? I'd like you to have that approach. Why? It's useful. At the same time, have an approach that, okay, what can I learn? How can I use this in my life? Is there something that I can change my outlook with? And this is where I'm going to talk to you about something. Because if you're listening to me, you're listening to me through the filter of your past. Language. If you did not understand the English language, what you're hearing from me are just some sounds that makes no meaning to you. The fact that I'm able to communicate to you and you're able to understand me is because in your database of memories, you already have the sounds associated with what is being spoken, and more importantly, the meaning associated with those words. So without your past, without your memory of what these words mean, you will not understand what I'm saying. So the past is extremely useful. It's absolutely useful for the reason that it helps you make sense of what's going on right now. But unfortunately, your memories aren't infallible. I'll go one step further. I'll say memories aren't even dependable. Why? Because the purest of memories are the ones that you do not access at all. There is science and research that proves this beyond doubt. The more we access a memory, the more it moves away from what it actually was that happened at that time. So I've heard people use this example. A Word document, a Microsoft Word document or a Google Doc Word file. If it's a read-only file and you've typed out something and you've made it into a read-only file, how many ever times you access it, it's going to remain the same. But unfortunately, our memories are like editable documents because we might have had an experience when we were 5. The knowledge and the understanding of a 5-year-old is where the experience takes place. However, if at age 6, I access that memory, it's not a 5-year-old version of a 5-year-old experience. It's a 6-year-old with the knowledge and experience of a 6-year-old accessing a 5-year-old's experience. So it alters, and so on and so forth. So it is relevant to understand that the past, if we are not aware, can have a great hold on us, which is what becomes an unthinking behavior. I'll also take a small segue into one of the most powerful books that I've read on this subject. And the title of the book is called The Emotional Life of Your Brain by Richard Davidson. It's a beautiful book, and I'd urge every one of you to actually read it to understand the most important thing that you need to know, which is the brain, your brain, and how it functions, and what are the various parts of the brain and how it affects day-to-day behavior. In that, Davidson says it beautifully. He says, by the age of 7, people's emotional styles are set in place. So what's an emotional style? We'll have to understand that as well, right? So Davidson says it beautifully. He actually talks about emotional states, moods, traits, and then the style. I probably am not going to do a great job if I try to verbatim repeat what he said, but I'll give you my understanding. The fleeting moments of emotion that we have, that's an emotional state. It lasts for a few seconds, maybe a minute, maybe a little more. That's an emotional state. Something that persists for hours or maybe days becomes it becomes a mood. So you have a state, which is the experience state. Then you have a mood which persists for a period of time. At these levels, the state and the mood, the underlying physiological structure of the brain that are associated, the structures of the brain that are associated with various emotions aren't affected. But when it persists beyond the mood, it becomes a trait. What does a trait mean? A trait means that there is a greater propensity to experience or respond with a certain emotion or feel a certain emotion. And then when that persists, that actually changes the underlying structure of the brain and it becomes an emotional style, right? And Davidson beautifully encapsulates it in the form of 6 characteristics that are put in place by age 7. Why age 7? Right? When we think a thought, What is a thought? The physiological process of a thought is when a series of neurons fire. We have neurons in our brain that make sense of all the inputs that come in through the various sensory organs and then creates this experience called life. Without our neurons, we don't have an experience. And there are 100 billion neurons in the brain. And each of these 100 billion neurons, on an average, connects to between 10 and 40,000 other neurons. So, to make it easy, 20,000 neurons is a number we'll take that each and every neuron is connected with. I'm not going to get into the details. There are enough and more books and data sources available for that. Please take a look at that. But when a neuron fires, it fires or lights up 20,000 other neurons. And each of those 20,000 other neurons fires another 20,000 other neurons, and so on and so forth. So this is where we have to understand one of the other building blocks of what we're going to be talking about in the HappYness Helix. I haven't even explained to you what the HappYness Helix is. I'm going to do that in a little bit. But these are the fundamental building blocks. The brain is an exceptionally beautiful thing. V.S. Ramchandran, who's called the Marco Polo of neuroscience, he says that the human brain is a spectacular thing. It can contemplate the universe. It can contemplate itself. It can contemplate itself contemplating the universe. And most beautifully, it can contemplate itself contemplating itself. So the brain is amazing. And what makes up the brain are these neurons. When we are born, the process of neurogenesis, birth of new neurons takes place. From the time that we are in our mother's womb till the time that we are born, neurons start growing. I'm not going to go into the subject of the fact that all human pregnancies are premature deliveries, even if it's a full term of 9 months. I'm going to leave that as suspense for a future episode, right? So 9 months in the womb, 2 months outside, 2 years outside the womb till we actually become a fully functional human being. So the process of neurogenesis takes place from about, greatest amount of neuronal connections, greatest amount of neurons that we have at the brain are between 6 months of age and 2 years of age. And that's the time those of us who've dealt with babies knows that people, all the babies, they are always trying to find out newer and newer things. That's because those neural connections are taking place. So neurogenesis takes place from the greatest number of neural connections takes place between 6 months of age after a child is born till about 2 years. And this is where we have to understand one very important thing. The brain is extremely energy efficient. Why is it energy efficient? Because it's extremely energy hungry. I don't know the exact numbers. I don't know how to measure it also. But there are research papers and people who have found out that while the brain is only about 2% of body weight, it consumes anything between 25 and 33%, 1/4 to 1/3 of all the energy that is consumed in the body. So if you have so many neural connections, then the brain is extremely, extremely active and it's gobbling up a lot of energy. Another fun fact that I came across somewhere, again, I don't know where I came across this. The strongest cell in terms of muscle, I'm told, is the thigh muscle. And the data said that a neuron at rest consumes more energy than a thigh muscle cell which is extended or exerted fully. That's how much energy the brain consumes. So because it consumes so much energy, it wants to generalize. It doesn't want to be making choices. It doesn't want to be thinking and processing information. So it tries to make neuronal pathways so that it can reduce the amount of effort, energy needed to process information. So from the age of 2 to about 7, there is another process. Again, I'm no expert on this. That's called neuronal pruning. So it cuts out everything that is not relevant. It cuts out and creates highways out of it, right? So that information can pass very quickly and efficiently with the least use of energy. Let me take an example to demonstrate this. Let's assume that you're on one side of a green field of, let's say, ankle-deep fresh grass. One side you have food, which is where you are. And on the other side of that field, you have water. And if you have to walk from one side, from the food to the water, chances are that you'll take the shortest and the simplest path, which is a straight line. And if you walk in a straight line from one end to the other, and you were to turn around and you look, you can make out exactly the path that you took, because the grass would have broken. This is what happens when a first thought is created and the neurons fire in a certain way. And if you had to come back from the water, back to the food, 99.99% of the time, you'll walk back the same way. Why? Because it's a path that you've already walked. And this is where evolution comes into play. Evolutionarily, we are wired to avoid problems. Like I said, we have to survive, not get killed. And only then can we thrive. So the same way, if we have to walk back, we will walk back the same way. Why? We know that we have survived the journey once. So we'll walk back the same way. And if I ask you to walk back, you'll go back the same way. And back the same way. So on and so forth, till suddenly you find that there is a path. It's a beautiful path. There is no grass. It's a path. And it requires the least effort for us to walk from one point to another. Exactly what happens with our thought processes. The more we think a certain thought, the greater the propensity to think the same thought. And sometimes we have thought it so many times that we don't have to think it. It just happens. It happens like that. So we have to understand that, I went on this segue for you to understand that the past plays an indelible and important role in how you're going to listen to me. So I'm requesting you to, at best, not be overly critical. Just look at it through one lens. Okay, how is this not right? Alongside that, have another lens. How is this going to be useful for me? How can I make my life better? Is there something that I can find? I'll tell you a story from my life. When I started this process and I started learning, reading and all of that, I was also as insecure as everybody else. Today, I am a lot less insecure than I was then. I'm not saying I'm completely secure, a lot less insecure. So when I used to read those books, and I read a new book on the same topic by another person, I'd be snarky and I'd say, you know what, from this book, I found out that I know more about this subject than that person knows. It's a very snarky comment. Because I can be arrogant and I can put somebody down only when I'm insecure. So when I make a snarky comment, I'm being arrogant. Actually, when I'm arrogant, I'm actually ignorant. Because arrogance can come only from a place of insecurity. It is only when I feel the need to be better than somebody else. And the fact is, this is the truth. This is not some philosophical fill in the blanks. Right? Every one of us is unique. So there is nobody who's better or worse than another. That's the truth. Might like it, you might not like it. Doesn't matter. It is the truth. Right? It's like saying, I don't like gravity. Doesn't matter. If you trip, you'll fall. Right? So it is as much of a truth as that each and every one of us is unique. And so I'm asking you to keep what's called an open mind. Right? And listen to see how you could benefit from this. Because sincerely, this podcast is entirely aimed at making the lives of people who listen better. It might be a small, teeny-weeny bit, and that's all that we are looking for. Nothing more, nothing less. So, the past plays an important role. I will do something about explaining how the past actually affects you, probably in another episode, not today. Let me get into what the HappYness Helix is all about. Right? The HappYness Helix. Like I said, it is a spiral staircase with steps that are slightly slanted downward. So every step that you put in front of the other is going to take a certain amount of effort. Therefore, remember, it's going to be difficult, effortful, almost impossible before it becomes easy, effortless in your own nature. I'm living proof of that. Every one of these steps, every one of these landings that are going to be referred to, I have experienced, I still experience in my own life. Right? I am not perfect. I keep telling people that every day in the morning I check when I'm brushing my teeth or shaving. I look in the mirror and see if I've got a halo. Never once have I found the halo. Except once when I was in Visakhapatnam and in a hotel. And I suddenly saw a light behind my head and I thought it was a halo. And to find out that there was a mirror behind, and that was my bald spot. Right? So I don't have a halo. I don't profess to be perfect. I don't profess to be the personification of happiness or responsibility of anything. However, I think I'm continuously learning how to be more responsible, how to be more accountable, and how to be happier. So let's finally get to the HappYness Helix. Like I said, steps going up, and there are these landings. The landings are so small that you can see them only when you're going up. And this HappYness Helix, when you're growing up, it's a staircase. When you're coming down, it is downward sloped, so you move faster, and suddenly it's almost like you're on a slide. So coming down, you're not going to find the landings. You're going to find some points that I'm going to make. They are reference points. They might not be real points, but they're reference points. Let's take a look at the HappYness Helix. Where does it start? Starts right here. This is it. I am who I am. I am where I am. And anything and everything that happened in my life to bring me here, to make me who I am, has already happened. It's of no relevance, except that it stays in my database of memories. And it affects me in ways that I really don't know that it affects me also. That's the beauty of it. However, I have a choice in this moment. And that choice is, this is it. I accept where I am. I accept who I am. I alone am responsible for who I am, where I am, what I have in my life. That's the starting point. That's right now. So the HappYness Helix, either in the upward direction or in the downward direction, starts exactly where each and every one of us is right now. And it doesn't matter whether you're listening to it today, tomorrow, or you listened to it yesterday, or a year later. It'll still apply. So the first point, I call it being happy, being purposeful. Or a simpler way of saying it is, I take responsibility for who I am, where I am in my life right now. That's the starting point. When I take responsibility for who I am, where I am, and everything that exists in my life right now, it also means that I'm not going to be blaming anything. I'm not going to be blaming anybody else. I'm not going to be complaining. I'm not going to be cribbing. I'm not going to play the victim. I'm not going to play the martyr. Because that's the other thing about life. The narrative, the story that we tell ourselves affects how we experience life. And in each and every one of our narratives, my narrative for sure, I'm the hero. Everything that happens in my life surrounds me, is around me. Without me, which is a fact, my life doesn't exist and happens every single day when I'm in my deep sleep. I don't know that even I exist. So when I wake up, I begin to start experiencing life again. I take on my database of memories and I start living life. So, responsibility, purposefulness, accountability, ownership, call it what you want. I call it happiness. I call it purposefulness. I call it being present without holding anything or anyone responsible for what is in my life today. I know some of you might be saying, enough, stop. But this is something that's extremely important. Therefore, I'm saying it again. Take responsibility, take accountability, take ownership. Be the person that you are because you are who you are because of what you've done with your life. It's not your parents, it's not your genes, it's not society, it's not anything. All of that informs us, yes. Does it affect us? Yes. But now that you've heard me say this, that you are where you are right now, from now on, I'm asking you to take responsibility. It doesn't matter what it has been in the past. So the first landing, where we start, is right now. I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for everything that exists in my life. Make that one switch, and life will never ever be the same again. And that will help you get to the next landing. That next landing is about an attitude of potential, of possibility, of solutions. I keep saying that FPS is to PNP should be 5:1. I will do an episode probably just on FPS is to PNP being 5:1. What is FPS and PNP? A few of my coaching clients have heard this. I'm going to say it. Future, potential, possibility, and solutions. It is about the future. It is about positive potentials and solution orientation. FPS. That should be 5 times to PNP. And PNP is past, negative, and problem orientation. Right? Fun fact, we'll come to this 5:1 when we talk about relationships and why a wonderful, good relationship needs to have a 5:1 of positive to negative interactions. Right? We'll talk about that in one more episode, maybe. Right? Don't know when, but that'll happen. So, if I take responsibility, ownership, and accountability for myself and where I am right now, the narrative that I tell myself will also change, where I'm going to have an attitude of possibility, optimism, can do. And I'm not going to be cribbing and complaining. Always remember A2, not C2. What is A2? Accept and act. Don't crib or complain. Simple. Accept and act. Don't crib and complain. So if I'm accepting and acting consistently every moment of my life, chances are that I will have what other people will say is a great attitude, positive attitude. The guy thinks about the guy or the girl or anything that you want to call yourself, right? Will say that this person has a great attitude. So I'm responsible for my life. I have a great attitude, which takes me to the third landing. The third landing is about being liked and supported. Right? Think about it. Look at your circle of friends. You like being with certain people because they bring out the best in you. And they are not just focused on themselves, they're focused on others as well. So when I have a great attitude, I'm not going to be focused entirely on myself. I'm going to be focused on other people as well. I'm going to be aware of what's going on. Chances are, because I have a great attitude, I will be liked, I'll be supported, I'll have a wider circle of people that I can lean on, I can ask for support. And there'll be so many people, which is true of my life. I have people who are experts in so many things that I can reach out to. And they will very eagerly support me in anything that I ask them for support on. Why? Because they seem to like me. Does this mean that everybody likes me? Certainly not. I know quite a few people who don't like me. That's okay, right? It needs to be there. But let's come back to this thing. I am liked and I am supported. So look at it from your perspective. You have a certain amount of resource or something to give. And on one hand, you have a person that you really like. And on another hand, you have a person that you really don't like. Who are you going to give it to? Chances are that you'll give it to the person that you like. So if I'm purposeful, I have a great attitude, I'm liked and supported, chances are that I will get a lot of support, inputs from a wide circle of people and not alone. And because I have so much of support, chances are that it'll get me to my fourth landing. And what's that fourth landing? Which is I will consistently, predictably achieve my objectives. Whatever objectives that I set out to achieve, I'll achieve them consistently, predictably. Because I'm not alone. I have a wide circle of friends, supporters, well-wishers. Not those who wish me in the well, but really well-wishers, right? And I'm wanted, not the dead or alive kind, but really wanted, because people want me in their life. They want me to be with them, right? I'm not a person who they say, oh, the guy's here, let me find something else to do, right? So because I have that, I get to the fourth landing consistently, predictably, because I set and achieve my objectives by design. Let's now look at the fifth landing. If I consistently, predictably achieve my goals by design, and I know that I have a great circle of people that I can rely on for support, I have a great attitude, I am taking responsibility for myself, right? Chances are that I will be growing in confidence. I will start looking at our objectives. And when I grow in confidence, I know that I am not having to do this alone. I have the support of a lot of people. So that's the fifth landing. I have greater confidence. I have greater belief. And that takes me to the sixth landing, which is I'm now going to be looking at things that are larger than me, bigger than me, that are more meaningful, not just for me, but for the ecosystem, the society, the community in which I live, right? So you'll see that I have a mug here, and that beautifully says, starts with the self, and then it says family, and then it says work, and then it says society. So if I focus on self, which is me, chances are that I will be able to be the best version of myself. And because I'm the best version of myself, I will be able to do a good job. I will have great relationships. When I say family, it's not just blood, but my extended circle of friends also. And I need to have meaningful work. Once I do all of these things, chances are that I'll be able to look at society, make a difference to society, which is also where I am right now. Most of my basic necessities have been met. And now I'm looking at, okay, I've learned through this process of living life. And consistently people who work with me, one-on-one, individuals, my coaching clients, they tell me that their sessions with me have had a great, useful benefit accruing to them, right? So I decided to put myself out there. I know I run the risk of being ridiculed, but I can't be ridiculed unless I choose to be ridiculed. So I'm going to take responsibility. So anybody who ridicules me, thank you. Anybody who appreciates me, thank you. Anybody who thinks I'm an idiot, thank you. Anybody who thinks I'm a genius, thank you. It really doesn't matter. This is something that I use in my coaching sessions as well, because some people tell me, I got upset, I got insulted. And I ask them this question, what's the worst insult that you can give to another person? And it varies. I will not get into, things that need to be bleeped out. The words that are used might need to be bleeped out if I have to cater to all audiences. So, but it really ranges. I'll give you one simple one that one of the people told me when they said that they had a constant issue, that everybody told them that they were being very angry. When I met with them, I asked them, what makes you angry? The person turned around, looked at me and said, if you get insulted, will you not get angry? So I said, okay. So tell me, what is the worst insult that you can give to another person? They thought for a long time, and then they said that, I'll call them a dirty pig. And I said, lovely. Do you know my name? And the person said, Cheenu. I said, okay. And what's the worst insult that you can give to another human being? And the person said, I will insult them by calling them a dirty pig. So I said, do you really want to learn something in life? The person said, yes, I do want to learn. So I said, how will you say that you're a dirty pig? And the person said, I'll call them, you are a dirty pig. And I said, lovely. Now call me by my name and say, I am a dirty pig in the same way. The person said, no, how can I? You're my coach. How can I say that to you? I said, you'll have to say that to me if you want to learn the lesson. Took about 10 minutes. And incidentally, they said, I can't say it. I said, no. You have just demonstrated that you can. You have the ability to say it. If you don't say it, you're choosing not to say it. You know my name. You say it's Cheenu. You say that the worst insult that you can give to another human being is that you'll call them a dirty pig. I said, now say, Cheenu, you're a dirty pig. And the person said, no, I can't. So about 15 minutes of cajoling. Then the person said, Cheenu, you're a dirty pig. I said, no, that's not the way you say it. I want you to say it with the same vigor, all of that. So another 10 minutes later, the person said, Cheenu, you're a dirty pig. And I said, yes, thank you. I'm the dirtiest pig in the entire universe. There is no pig that is dirtier than I. I'm the greatest, dirtiest pig that can ever exist. And the person looked at me and said, that's because you have decided not to get insulted. And I looked at that person and said, precisely my point, my friend. If I do not choose to get insulted, then you cannot insult me. Right? I'm reminded of a story that is attributed to the Buddha. That somebody came and cursed him and scolded him and all of that. And he was sitting Buddha-like, as the Buddha can. And everybody else was getting a little upset that this person came and cursed him and gave him all these kinds of, threw such words at him. And when that person went away, they asked him, Buddha, how can you allow this person to scold you, to be so disrespectful of you? The Buddha said, if somebody comes to your home with gifts and they want to give it to you and you don't accept it, who keeps the gifts? And the man said, the person who wanted to give me the gift. I said, exactly the same thing with insults. So if people give me insults, thank you. I choose not to be insulted. I know that I'm putting myself out there in social media. And there will be quite a few of you who will think that I am the world's biggest clown. Thank you. There will be some of you who will think that I am God's gift to mankind. Thank you. Neither of them is true, because all that matters is what I think of myself, right? What you think of me doesn't matter. And I'd like you to live life with the same approach, because you give far too much importance to what other people are thinking about you. Little knowing that they are thinking so much about themselves, they don't have time to think of you. If at all they are thinking of you, they are thinking of you only in the context of how they can blame you for their misery in life. Remember, I am responsible for everything that exists in my life. Does that mean that I should not be responsible and aware and polite when I'm talking to you? Certainly not. I should do my best to be polite, aware, and appropriate when I'm talking to you. But will I bend over backwards for that? Unlikely. So this is the HappYness Helix podcast, remember. And happiness depends entirely on you. Depends on your definition, right? So let's recap on the HappYness Helix. I'm purposeful. I don't crib and complain. I take responsibility for myself. I have a great attitude. Landing number 2. Landing number 3, I am supported. Landing number 4, I achieve my goals consistently and predictably. Landing number 5, I have greater confidence. Landing number 6, I take on larger, bigger, better projects. And that brings me to landing number 7. But it's actually landing number 1, but it's a different place. So that's how the HappYness Helix goes up. We're going to take a small break right now, and I'm going to talk about the HappYness Helix in the downward direction as soon as we are done. So here we are after the break. Just managed to get myself a cup of coffee, which probably might be one of the episodes, because one of the things that I really like talking about is copy. So copy will happen later, but let's now get on to the downward spiral. The HappYness Helix going up is what we've spoken about. Let's look at what happens when we look at it in the opposite direction. I call it the unhappiness slide, because it's not steps, it's a slide. So the HappYness Helix is tough work when we're going up. It requires awareness, consciousness, and being focused and committed to it. When I look at the opposite, what happens? When the HappYness Helix goes in the downward direction, it's the unhappiness slide. It starts off slow, and before you know it, you're spinning out of control, and nothing seems to be working. So just like the HappYness Helix starts with this moment, this is it. The unhappiness slide starts with, why is this like this? Why is my life so bleeped up? What did I do to deserve this? Why doesn't anything work for me? Why is life such a drain? Why did I not get the right family? Why did I not get the right kind of education? Why is it so effed up? That's the beginning of the unhappiness slide. Because if you don't arrest the slide at this point in time and switch it to saying, this is it, I am where I am, the next steps will take place. And let's take a look at those next steps. When I complain about my life and how my life is, I'm obviously not taking responsibility. I'm holding other people, environment, society, circumstances, the opportunities that I did not get, or all kinds of things that did not work for me. And I'm saying, I am blameless, poor me. My God, what more could I have done? It just didn't work for me. My father was like this, my mother was like this. For a moment, please don't take me amiss. I am not for a moment saying that there aren't abusive relationships. Please, that's not my intent. I absolutely understand that there are abusive relationships. There are people who bully, who take advantage of others. I am not condoning any of that behavior. But if you're listening to me right now, chances are that you have now a choice. And hopefully through these podcasts, through these episodes, you will equip yourself to break free, take responsibility, and get free and be really liberated even in an abusive relationship. My sympathy is with you, but my sympathy for you is of no use. The example that I use is that if somebody is in a very deep sewer, there are two kinds of people. One group of people will stand outside and they'll say, oh my God, so sorry, you're in the sewer. My God, how did you get into the sewer? Must be horrible. I understand it must be bad. I know you've got sewage right up to your lips. You can't even open and speak. My God. That's one set of people. The other set of people will be people like me who will come and say, okay, you're in the sewer. Now feel around. See if you can put your hand on something. Feel if you can put your leg on something. Because you're too far away for me to reach out and grab a hold of you. You'll need to do something on your own. And then I can support you. I don't have a rope to throw down for you. So I'm going to ask you to find so that you can climb a little up. Once you climb up, either I can reach out and pull you out, or I can throw you a rope which reaches you and you can climb out. So I'd rather that I am that person who supports you. I acknowledge the fact that you are there. I am not saying that, you are responsible for somebody being abusive with you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you're responsible for how you respond to it. Right? And this is where I'd like to also talk a little about what John Maxwell says. And he says it beautifully. He says, people change in 4 seasons. You can look it up on YouTube. Absolutely amazing snippet. We'll try to see if we can put a link to that in the podcast show notes. He says people change in 4 seasons. 1, when they hurt enough that they have to change. 2, when they see enough that they are inspired to change. 3, when they learn enough that they want to change. 4, when they receive enough that they are able to change. More often than not, we default to the first one and we tell that, people, they will not change unless they hurt. No, it could be one of the 3. I might have flipped 2 and 3 because I'm paraphrasing. Kindly accept my apologies for that. Take a look at the video and you'll find out. It's a most powerful talk, 37 minutes by John Maxwell on YouTube. One of the many people that I have learned from. So, unhappiness slide. Maxwell says that there are 4 ways in which people change. More often than not, we default to the first one, that they need to hurt enough that they have to change. We forget that it might be because they don't know better. They have not got the resources. So those of you who are in any kind of abusive relationship or in a situation where you believe that you are not able to help yourself, my apologies. And hopefully this podcast will give you some kind of insight in terms of what you can do to get yourself out of the situation. But it begins with one simple fact. This is it. This is where I am. This is who I am. So, if I'm unhappy and I'm not taking responsibility for my situation in my life, chances are that I'm cribbing and complaining and whining and holding everything and everyone else responsible for my situation in life. And I'm blaming others. I'm blaming society. I'm blaming religion. I'm blaming all kinds of organizations, the government, right? Anything. You can blame anything. I can blame anything. But from that blame, it leads me to have a very negative approach to life. Remember I talked about FPS is to PNP being 5:1? In most people's life, PNP is to FPS is 5:1. They're constantly thinking about the past. They're negative about the past. They're only focusing on the problem. And 5 times out of 6, they're focusing on the past, the negative, and the problem. I heard this somewhere. It's a beautiful statement. The past is a place of reference, not of residence. Most people tend to live in the past. I had written a blog article a while ago about, are you driving your life looking into the rearview mirror all the time? If you take a vehicle, right, there is a rearview mirror inside. There are 2 outward rearview mirrors. And there is this windscreen. And I have the brake, whatever. If it's a Tesla, I don't know. I'm giving away my vintage. I'm still used to manual. I've graduated to an automatic vehicle, right? So I have a combination of the clutch, the brake, and the accelerator, the steering wheel that I have to maneuver to get to my destination. The question that I ask my clients is, when you drive, what percentage of time will you look into the rearview mirrors? What percentage of time of driving will you look into the rearview mirror? And I say 1 inside and 2 outside. In Bangalore and in India, the outside mirrors or for 2-wheelers is mostly to do makeup, not to see what's on traffic. That's a separate thing altogether. My friend Arun might talk about it on his media channel. But for us, when I ask this question, people say about 5 to 10% of the time I'm looking in the rearview mirror. And about 25% of the time I'm focused on the brake, the accelerator, and the steering. The rest of the time, I'm actually looking where I'm going. I'm focused on what's there and getting to my destination appropriately. And I asked them a question. Let's assume that you went into a pothole somewhere. And what would happen if you kept on looking at the rearview mirror? That pothole. How could I have gone into that pothole? That person who did repair the pothole. And if I drive that way, chances are not a pothole, I'll go off the road. That's why I say PNP being 5 to FPS being 1 isn't useful. So the first step, take responsibility. But in the unhappiness slide, what happens? I blame, I crib, I complain, I play the victim, I play the martyr. Everybody in the world except me is the problem. That leads me to point 2. Remember, I said landing 1, landing 2, landing 3. But here on the downward slide, they are places of reference. They are not definitive points. They are not definitive landings. They are definitive points. Not even definitive points. They are indicative points. So, if I'm unhappy and I'm not taking responsibility for myself, I'm blaming the world, I'm blaming everything and anything else in the world, chances are that my attitude is not going to be very, very useful. I'm going to be look at life with a lot more pessimism than optimism. I'm going to look at life as a problem to be solved. I'm not going to look at life as an opportunity. So chances are that my attitude is not going to be great. So if my attitude isn't great, it brings me to the next point. Remember, I asked you a question. If you have some resources and you have a person whom you like and a person that you don't like, who will you give it to? Chances are when you are blaming the world and you don't have a great attitude, chances are that your circle of people will be smaller. Chances are, I'm only saying chances are, that you might not be appreciated by others. I might not be appreciated by others. Let me stick to the first person. That's another topic that we will talk about, how people slip into the second person and the collective when it doesn't suit them. Right? So, chances are that I will not be liked by people. Chances are that I will not get the right kind of support. Chances are that I will not have enough people to learn from, to go and ask, to vet my thoughts. There are people who are not going to be giving me feedback, inputs, because if I'm a person who blames the world, even if I get feedback, I'm only going to be looking at how can I prove them wrong and tell them that I'm blameless. So I play the victim. I will justify. I will have excuses. Right? So that's not useful. So if I'm unhappy, I don't take responsibility, I don't have a great attitude, I'm pessimistic, I'm negative, I'm looking at problems, I'm looking into the rearview mirror all the time, chances are that I will even hit my vehicle on people who are there to help me. Because I'm so busy looking at the past, the front, future, there are people waiting to help me, I might run them over. And that will further reduce my circle of friends and support. So if I don't have a circle of friends and support and knowledge sources, chances are that my achievement of objectives that I set out to achieve, might be inconsistent, might not be effective. I might not achieve my objectives at all. It will be less than ideal. And that leads me to the 6th point, where I will feel like I am a fill in the blanks. My confidence will go down. I might use words like I'm a failure. I'm good at nothing. I am of no use. Self-pity. All of that will happen. And when I'm so focused on myself, self-pity, my basic needs are unlikely to be met. So I'm going to be more and more selfish because I'm blaming and blaming and blaming. I'm not going to have time to look around and see who else needs what I can give them. And that one simple thing, when I'm in the greatest of misery, going out actively and supporting others who need support will arrest the slide. Remember this, we'll talk about it in one more episode. Just the fact of going out and supporting others, helping others, even though my situation is not great, that one act can break us out of this unhappiness slide and help us to climb up. I think I might get the name wrong here, but I think it's Nipun Mehta, a wonderful human being who walked the length and breadth of India, used to work in, I think, NASA or something. I'm really not sure. But there are TED Talks that he has given. Please watch them. Where he talks about the fact that wherever in India he found people who had the least, they had the greatest intention to give. So, if I'm so focused on myself and I'm selfish and I'm blaming the world, chances are that I will be unhappier. I will only slide faster and faster down the slide. So, now that you've heard all of this, some of you might agree, some of you might not agree, right? And I'm absolutely willing, able, and ready to learn. Any of you who comments where I might make it a little better, right? And I have a request, be kind, right? If you want me to listen to you, be inspiring. That's another episode that we're going to be talking about. How can I be inspiring? How can I communicate inspiringly? How do I give feedback? How do I give people inputs for them to make themselves better? Regardless, however you give it, I will choose to look at it as constructive inputs for me. So you can choose to climb the happiness helix one step at a time. Or you can continue to blame circumstances, events, your family, and all of that, and slide down faster and faster, right? And the faster you slide down the unhappiness slide, the lesser control you'll have. And that's something I don't think you want for yourself. I have been there. I have done all of these things. I've experienced the unhappiness slide for myself. I say this to all my clients. I have learned the importance of honesty by being dishonest. I have learned the importance of integrity by being non-integrous. I have learned the importance of responsibility by not taking responsibility and blaming others. So, I hope this is useful to you. We will delve a little more into these and the steps that can take you from one landing to another, hopefully, right? The first step is, how can I take responsibility for myself, that I respond rather than react? That might be one of the first steps that we will talk about in a future episode. Everything that I do it with a certain invocation before I start whatever I'm doing. Remember, I said there are two ways in which I can have a purposeful life. One, I can identify what is my purpose in life and put everything that I have towards that purpose. The other way I can do this is being purposeful in everything that I do. If I'm purposeful in this episode, this podcast episode, 100% focused on how useful it might be to you, the listener, chances are that if I take that and do that in everything of my life, I will have moments of life that are 100% purposeful. And if every moment of my life is 100% purposeful, because I put all of these moments together, chances are that I would have lived a purposeful life. So I start this with an invocation, right? And the invocation, I'm going to say it in Sanskrit, and I'll give you the English version of it. It is absolutely nothing to do with religion here, but it is part of the Bhagavad Gita. It is chapter 2, verse 47 and 48. Chapter 2, verse 47 says, Karmanyeva adhikarasti ma paleshu kadachana ma karma pala hetur buhu ma te sangostva karmani. And this means do your duty without being attached to the credit or the fruits of your labor. Chapter 2 verse 48 says, Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddha asiddhyo samabhutvam samatvam yogamuchyate. What it means is, do your duty diligently without being attached to success or failure. And then it goes on to say, treating success and failure the same is the greatest equanimity and is the greatest happiness. So whenever I start something, I did say that silently before we started recording for this podcast episode. The other thing that I do always when I finish a client session or anything that I do is to use again a Sanskrit verse. It says, Karman Kayena vacha manasendriyarva buddhyartmanava prakriti svabhavat karomi yadyat sakalam parasmai guru iti samarpayami, narayana iti samarpayami, ishvara iti samarpayami, devi iti samarpayami. All it means is that whatever is said or done by me, either because of what I've said or by my natural tendencies or my awareness or even without being aware, whatever credit, it goes to that one large pool that you can call it whatever it is. This is very useful to make sure that the ego doesn't take hold of anyone. And that's the only reason I say these things. So with that, I will conclude by saying, smile, be happy. It's a choice. Thank you for listening.